Yo, hello, and welcome to the 1218 show. I've been looking forward to my next guest. This is episode 18. We've had a hard time getting together because we live on opposite coasts. But my guest today is Adrian Cooper. He's one of my best friends. We grew up together. We've known each other just over 40 years now. Just under 40 years now. It'll be 40 years this summer. Actually, right now it'll be about 40 years, I believe, because it would be the summer before second grade. And I'm excited to have him on. I think I mentioned in the last one that we could talk for hours and hours, literally, about anything and everything. But I want to give him a proper introduction. This is a special guest for me, and I think that, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to have lots of episodes, quote unquote, in the future. The reason why this is special to me is everyone has people in their lives that when you look at them or talk to them, you think, man, you know what, they've done things right, or they've got it figured out, or whatever. And the cool thing about Adrian is that he's kind of blazed his own path in a lot of ways, taken some much less conventional ways to get to the means to an end, but it's all worked out for him, and it's not because he rolled lucky dice. He's worked his ass off to get there, and so we've had, a lifetime of conversations and fun, and I think that when most people meet this man, they have that same opinion, like, man, that dude's really put together a nice life, but he crafted it, and that's kind of what I wanted to go at, is that for this first time that we're going to have him on, I just wanted to talk about, like, what it is that makes him happy, because he truly is a happy individual, and I think that people are seeking that. A lot of people are seeking that. What is it that I could do in my life to make myself happier, etc. And in a lot of ways, he's a very, very happy person, and I think that, but he's constantly working on it. That's something we're going to talk about. So we're going to start off. First of all, we're going to title this particular episode "You Don't Know Shit." We'll explain that here in a second. and then we're going to talk about, we spent the day together trolling around Manhattan, so we're going to, we had a good conversation that we're going to bring into this one, so that we don't bring up an 8-hour podcast here. We're just going to keep it to those two quick topics. But I want to say, Adrian, thank you and welcome.
It's good to be here. Always good to come to NYC. I love the energy of being in the city. It's fun. Some of the best days we've had here, I've been here many, many times over the years, and some of the best days we've had are these days where we don't really have much of a plan, and we're just kind of walking around the city, we're walking around the park or whatever it is, and the conversation just flows, and there's you see all these different cues around you. In the city, there's so much, so almost everything sparks a conversation of some sort. There's so many topics to talk about. So today was another great day where it's hard to say. I couldn't make a list and go, okay, X, Y, Z was why this was so awesome. It was just like we just hung out.
Yeah, that's right.
That's basically it. So, yeah. But always good to be here in NYC, and it really has been a great day, and we still got many hours left. So
on a side note, just if any of you are interested in going down in Hudson Yards, they have that tall building, and they got that thing called the Edge, which is kind of that outdoor platform that hangs off the side of the building, and you're on the 100th floor, and you can kind of see all of Manhattan. So we were excited to do that. We decided we were going to do it, and but if it happens to look like it could be questionable weather, don't do it.
Correct.
we get up to the top, and they're like, "Oh, you guys, we just had to shut it down because there's lightning in the area." And we're like, "Oh, all right. Well, can we get a rain check or a refund? How do we go about that?" And they're like, "Nope."
So, yeah, we walked. The whole point is to be able to walk outside on this observation deck.
So it's 100 stories in the air, like it was cool as could be. And so
the only 100 that got lost was $900 to go up there. Yeah.
Jesus. So we, anyway, they kept saying, we waited. We thought that, because it was kind of a passing thunderstorm, but after 2 hours, we finally got more than that. We gave up. We were like, all right, let's just go do something else. But it was, but it is beautiful. Just not being on the outside, but looking out the windows, it was really kind of neat. But the excitement was really this kind of, because it's an open air patio. It's got obviously glass to protect a protective glass, but it's 100 stories in the air, and you're literally standing outside on a ledge. And we were totally pumped to do it, and we get up there, and they were like, "Oh, you guys," and we're like, "Well, how long ago did they shut it down?" Like, "Oh, 2-3 minutes." And we're like, "When we can't get a rain check?" Nope.
Yeah,
it was lame. So.
Yeah, it's pretty weak, but it was still a fun time, really. And it was actually still pretty cool up there. So
it was cool. I mean, it's really no different than like when you go to Sears Tower or whatever. You actually just go to the windows and ledge and look out at everything. I mean,
so it was still fun.
Yeah, so it was cool, or Empire State Building or anything like that.
And also the platform's only on one side, so or maybe kind of two sides. So the rest of it's the same anyway, right? Yeah, you can only see it from inside.
But yeah, so I mean, it was neat. It was just we kind of got the shaft on that, but. To his point, we still had a great time. We sat around, we talked. They have a bar and a restaurant and stuff up there, so we were able to sit and kind of visit and catch up. And like we said, the conversations never end. So, all right. So I want to go into our philosophy. So, and I've had this kind of joke, and he has a memory of how it started. I don't necessarily remember the specific reason, but. All of our lives, we always knew that we didn't know anything. Let me explain what I mean by that. We've always said, all right, listen, we're 15 years old right now. We know what we know, and we all thought we were Mr. Smarty Pants. But we're like, when we're 20, we're gonna know a lot more than we do now. And A's dad was always quite funny. He would be like, man, you don't know shit. Like we would always he would remind us of that all the time. And I was always with, tongue in cheek, big funny. But he was so right. And as we grew up, we're like, all right, we're 20 now. We think we know everything. But when we're 30, we're going to realize we didn't know shit when we were 20.
Yeah, I can tell you, I remember the day that I kind of started to figure that part out. I know exactly where I was. I was working at Jewel and at the grocery store in our hometown, and we both worked there from 15 on. And I was working kind of early evening shift, and there was a bunch of junior high kids that came in. At the time, I was 16, so you're talking about kids that were 3 years younger, I guess, or 4 years younger, maybe. Wasn't like they were that young, and they were in the store, and they were just being 12-year-olds in the store. They're eating candy out of a little, remember back then they had the bins of candy that you could fill up bags up or whatever. So we'd always go in there and you always go in there and eat a couple of gummy worms or whatever. Anyway, they're just being silly and loud and obnoxious in the store. And I was kind of watching them, and I had the thought to myself, look at these 12-year-olds. They don't know shit. They think they're the kings of the world. They think they know everything. Yeah. They know nothing. They're only in 7th grade. But me, I know everything. I'm a sophomore. I figured out life at that time. And no, so I was sort of watching them, and I was saying, oh man, that's look at these kids or whatever. And this manager walked up. I was kind of watching them from the back area, and it was Kurt Trotter, if you remember him.
Okay.
And he walked up and he said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was like, "I was just watching these kids or whatever. You don't know anything." And he kind of laughed at me, of course, because he was, 10 years older at the time. And I was like, "What's so funny?" And he's like, "Well, you don't know anything either, and you don't know much either, And I said, "Actually, that's true. When I was them, I thought I knew everything already, and now I sort of thought I knew everything." It's obviously not true, so probably that same thing is going to keep happening. And, of course, it does in life. And even now at 45, I'm very aware that I still don't know shit. Yeah. You start learning a few things and figuring out a few things, of course, but there's so much to learn. So that was where I learned it, and I always try to keep that in mind, and I took it to heart and try to remember all the time, that we don't know shit. One fast little story I'll tell that's related to this is that a very, very good friend of mine from graduate school, my buddy Mo, he's from Jordan, and he was telling a story to me where he said he's like, oh, I was back in Jordan. I saw his grandfather's like 90-year-old, Jordanian guy from the Middle East who they've seen a lot of shit over there, and Mo was having trouble with his girlfriend at the time, and he's like, Grandpa, it's so hard. I just don't really understand women. And the grandfather said, well, me neither. And he was like, shit! there's no
answer.
That's right. So he's like, well, Vince hasn't figured it out, it'll never be figured out. So I think there's a lot of little anecdotal stories one could tell that follow this theme. But I think the most important thing to do in life, or one of the most important things to do, is to realize that. And it really is what keeps you learning. It keeps you going. It keeps you, with the mentality of trying to learn and improve yourself or make yourself better along the way, if you kind of see some of those things. So
I have a funny question that obviously it's one of those questions that everybody could ask, and party question when you debate. At what point do you think, at what age, and obviously it could be fluid, but what age do you think that it starts to go the other way? For instance, if you're 80 years old, you're never going to be able to stay abreast with technology or keeping up and that kind of stuff. So what do you, I think like 72? Like what's the age where it's like, wait a minute, I'm at the top of the mountain. Even if I don't know everything, this is as much as I'm ever going to know. And now I'm going to start forgetting shit and stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. I guess for me, I hope it never happens. I have to say that you can always kind of keep going. There's always examples of people who stand out and most of them are ones who do continue to learn. I think that I think you can always keep growing. I heard an interview with one of these comedians. It wasn't Don Rickles, but somebody from that same generation or whatever. Who Don Rickles probably died at 91 or something. And I heard an interview with, it wasn't Don Rickles, but it was somebody of that same, one of his contemporaries, and he was like 94 at the time. And he's like, I'm a completely different person than I was at 84. And so I think when you have that level of realization and understanding about life, it's part of the reason why you make it to 94. Right? You keep your mind going, you keep yourself engaged. One of the things, I don't want to skip ahead around in stories too much, but one of the things, I always look up and admire my in-laws who are, extremely active. They're still, they're still very sharp. They never really kind of sat down and said, okay, that's it, I'm done learning. And, I think it's a big reason why they've had, such fulfilled lives. And I think, to be honest, my folks are the same way in that they're not afraid to keep on having new experiences. I think a lot of people who are their contemporaries, who are from their age, if you took people who grew up where they did and had similar, let's say a similar, geographic and socioeconomic life path, I think a lot of those folks wouldn't do half the stuff my folks do. They're really, they're open to, they come out to San Diego, they're open to going to Mexico, they're open to new experiences all the time, and I think that's what keeps you young. And it's really is an admirable quality, and we can learn a lot from the people who came before us. And so it's a good example of something that sets a great, that I think sets a great example.
Yeah, that's cool. It's funny talking about the people that come before us, because I think a lot of, it's interesting. You take all these things that you learn from your parents, and then you also, as you grow up, you kind of have a little checklist of, well, I didn't necessarily agree with that or like that either. You can learn as much from them that you didn't like about them. And I'm not saying you didn't like anybody like their parents, but everybody has, I look back on I'll say my mother was a smoker, right? She was a cigarette smoker. And I remember my grandmother was too. And my grandmother, when she was getting towards the end of her life, I was like, Grandma, give me some advice. And she's like, don't smoke cigarettes. And then she gave me one other piece of advice, but I'll save that for another time. She had two pieces of advice for me, but one of the two was don't smoke cigarettes.
Was the other one never trust a big butt and a smile? Because that's also pretty sound advice.
Well, the irony is, I will go, since you brought it up, the other one was, she said, and this is going to piss some people off, but she said, never trust a woman. Every one of them has secrets. And I was like, those were the 2 pieces of advice that she gave me.
Not that far off.
Not that far. Never trust a big butt and a smile.
Yeah.
So she, but anyway, now unfortunately, I didn't take my grandmother's advice, and the thing that I couldn't stand, that, growing up, I hated seeing my mom smoke cigarettes, and then I smoked for 10 years myself, like maybe 12 years, I guess. So, I mean, the stupidity of it is absurd, but luckily I don't smoke anymore, and neither does my mom, thank God. So, but I do get I do think that it's funny because you can learn just as much from them on both sides of watching from their mistakes as well as their successes. It's kind of a neat thing. So, of course, back then, all the information wasn't out. I mean, it was kind of obvious that cigarettes weren't good for you, but they didn't know that, everybody's just going to be dropping dead if they smoked for 30 years because they didn't have 30 years of information to go on yet.
Yeah. That's funny. You just sparked another memory in my mind of, again, speaking of not knowing shit, there was this guy when we worked at Jewel, his name was this guy named Jason, and I don't know if you remember this story or not, but he was a smoker, and I think maybe for us, it is weird with kids sometimes. I think because both of our parents smoked, we were very turned off by it, but then there are those who follow in those footsteps for whatever reason, but I never had the desire. But anyway, back then we were really turned off by it, and he would go. Back then you could smoke indoors in places, and so he would sit up in the break room.
That's right, you could smoke in the break room.
or whatever. He would sit up in the break room smoking, and he was only like, a couple of years older than us, and so I would always harp on, every time you see a smoker, we'd always harp on him. You're gonna die. Why are you smoking? Yeah. What's wrong with you? And I remember him saying, I was like, what are you gonna do, man? You're gonna be dead when you're 30. And he's like, well, if I die when I'm 30, I'll be happy because I got to live the life I wanted to live by smoking this cigarette in this break room right now. Or whatever. And I even remember then thinking, look, I know I'm only 16, but dying at 30 is not the answer.
That's right.
And so I'm sure that if you could go talk to if your 30-year-old self would build a time machine, come back here right now, it would slap you in the face for being so stupid. And so,
I remember that guy too, man. He was rough to talk to.
He was rough. So again, it's just I think what happens is it's this idea that or that you understand what kind of some of the things about life are about. And even though I didn't know shit back then, I knew that dying at 30 sounded like not the plan that I wanted to go after. Yeah. So. But he was fine with that because he got to smoke in the Jewel break room or whatever. I'm sure he's not dead, or I guess I don't know, but just another example there. Yeah. Where you can be a little bit short-sighted at times.
That's actually a good little segue because we one of the conversations that we had today, bringing us to the second topic that I said we'd talk about today, is when opportunities come your way. And A was talking to me earlier, and I'll let him take over here in a second. Because he was saying, you only really get a few, opportunities in your life that are just kind of tailor-made. And he's like, the key is kind of recognizing them, that like, oh wait, all the ingredients are lined up, all the stars are aligned, and then acting upon that. And he has been very in tune with that, and because of that, he's traveled the world, which is something we'll hit on. He's traveled the world. He's been like years traveled the world, and then had very successful in with his degree from school and in the science field, and then as well as investing and all that other stuff. And all of these have happened because he recognized opportunity and then enacted a plan to take advantage of the opportunity. And so we were talking about that today, and I was saying how I've had some stars align a few times and just let them pass. And I'm like, I don't know how many more times that can happen. Maybe if I'm lucky, maybe one more time. Next time I'll maybe jump on it. but we had a good laugh, as you said. But I was like, that's a great topic for our first podcast that we're going to do. So I don't know. What do you feel like your first, where the stars aligned? What do you feel like your first thing is like? Sweet, there's an opportunity, and I'm going to run with it.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think there's been several yet where there's kind of a fork in the road of life, and there's these life altering forks. I think, and I've been fortunate to recognize some of those along the way, and I could point to several specific ones, but I think one I want to talk about now is why I ended up kind of deciding to go traveling, and recognizing the opportunity that was there for me to be able to to kind of take advantage of where I happened to be in life at that time. And I don't know if that probably wasn't the first one, but it was the second one, I think, and it was a major one for me. I had grown. We grew up in. You've heard Mike reference many times on this podcast in Central Illinois, and it's a it can be a small world there in many ways, and but it's a great world. I mean, there's a lot of really there's a lot of positives about where we grew up, and I think one of the things I understood later that was lacking is it's very homogeneous there, and there's not a ton of diversity, and at least back then there wasn't. And when I started to I went to college at Notre Dame, and you start meeting people, not just racial diversity, but religious diversity, although you have a lot of Catholics there, but also, more than anything to me, it was people from all over the U.S. and all over the world. And that had a really profound effect on me, meeting somebody from Texas or Wyoming, where one of my roommates is from, or California, where I live now, or Kentucky, or some of these other places that were around. And I started to have this strong affinity to kind of meet people and meet other cultures and understand other cultures. And a big piece of that was this girlfriend that I had who was from Spain that I dated through college, and so I had a lot of international friends as well who were from other countries. And I started to really it really started to open my mind out to the world and how much bigger things were, and other languages and all those things. And so I started at some point really wanting to go and get out there and kind of travel the world, see some of these places people were from. I had a really big interest in that. And
I gotta tell one quick joke that I remember when he was a freshman at Notre Dame, and we were talking on the phone. Now mind you, this is long before smartphones, so we actually had to plan a phone call. And so we're on the phone, and he was like, man, he's like, I can't believe it. I was up here, and we're talking, and the Bulls were playing, and these guys are like, oh man, F that. Well, who gives a shit? Like, Michael Jordan, fuck Michael Jordan. And he's like, how do you not like Michael Jordan? And he's like, I finally realized, not everyone likes the Bulls.
That's true. Yeah,
it's such a simple thing, but it was so like, outside of our little world, they're like, wait a minute, people don't like Michael Jordan? Like, what the,
Yeah, it seems impossible. Yeah, that's a really good example where, I truly had no idea. And maybe I'm sure there's people who we grew up with that understood that, but for me, it wasn't there. That level, that very small level of understanding that everybody's not cheering for the Bulls is a good example of what you don't really know or don't understand about the world when you're kind of trapped in your own little bubble. And there's many examples of that, so that's pretty funny. Yeah. Anyway, so I really wanted to travel, and I started to get this bug to want to do a lot of things. And it's funny because growing up, the only vacation I really ever went on was with you to, when we went to Opryland. Yeah. Which, that's weird. In my mind back then, it's like, we drove for 3 days.
8 hours.
It seemed like it was so far away. But anyway.
And then the beach, when we graduated high school, we went down to Daytona.
That was the other big one, which, man, that's a whole nother story, obviously.
But that was just as kids. That was without, Opryland, we were kids.
Yeah, we were little. But, that was probably the first time I really left the state of Illinois, was when we went to Opryland. Yeah. And the second time was probably when I drove with our other friend Jeff to Iowa to to go see a football game of a friend of ours who had moved away. So
I actually have a picture of us in Opryland, which is it's quite funny to look back on just because it was at the times our socks are pulled up over our calves and all that stuff. So if you're listening to this and it's not on the YouTube version, I'll put the picture up, flash the picture up for a couple seconds on the YouTube version so you guys can see it in Opryland. It had to be about 1985, somewhere in that ballpark.
All right, watch out for my guns in the picture.
I think he's wearing a half shirt too, looking like Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds.
I know exactly what the picture looks like. Classic. I looked malnourished. Let's say that, and I probably was a little bit malnourished. But my mom always made pretty good food for us. So anyway, I think that where I wanted to go is that, kind of skipping a lot, is I started to get exposed to the world, and I really wanted to I got this idea in my head that I really wanted to travel, and I fast forwarding through, after college, and I was in graduate school, and I went, I had a very good friend, Sonny, who hopefully also could come on this podcast someday.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, that is a guy who's got some
I'll go
stories.
to him. Yeah. I know he's got a big place down there. We can meet down wherever he's at, and I'll bring all the stuff with him.
And so I went with Sonny and some other friends. They were on a 4 or 5 week trip in Europe, and I went with them. And I went to Barcelona, and I went to a few other cities. And ironically, I actually, the reason why I'm here on the East Coast is I just came back from Europe, and I was in Barcelona. And actually, while I was there, I had told my wife Jody, I said, "Oh, I want to go to this one plaza where this hostel was." And when I went there on that trip, it was the very, very first time I ever stayed in a hostel, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences I had ever had in my life at that point in time. And I went back to that hostel. Actually, I'll show you later. I took a picture in front of it and sent it to Sonny and the other guys.
Oh, that's funny.
And I said that first night in that hostel changed the trajectory of my entire life in every way. And there was just people from all these other countries that were there, and everybody was just traveling, and they were just living their lives traveling, and I just thought it was crazy. And I remember I met these Canadian girls, and they were just sitting there drinking a beer in the hostel, and they were telling these stories. They had hitchhiked they'd come to England, and they'd hitchhiked through France, and they'd stopped and worked on a beach town, and they were just telling these stories about their travels, and I was just, in awe. And I was like, wow, this sounds amazing. And they're like, and I remember them saying to me, "Oh, how long are you traveling here for?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just meeting some friends, and I've got like whatever, 12 days or whatever it was at the time." And they were like, "Oh, we're traveling for 6 months." And I was like, 6 months? Are you out of your fucking mind? How is that? How is that even possible? And I think what happened was that night, as I started talking to more and more people, I started realizing, why am I not doing this?
Right, it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
It's just,
Why am I not doing this? And that night in that hostel, it's called Kabul in Barcelona, a legendary hostel still to this day. That night and that whole trip was the beginning of one of the major forks in the road for me. And it was one of the beginning of these things where I said, I think and see and know that I'm starting to see a goal of what I want to do. And it planted the seed for me to start. What I always say is, like, I'm a big believer that you have to sort of push your life in the direction that you want it to go. And that was really the beginning of it, was that night in that hostel. So it's funny that I was just standing in front of it, 4 days ago.
Yeah.
And then kind of talking about this now. And so, fast forward about a year and a half later, and again, I'm skipping a big, long piece of the story, I started to realize that at that time...
all right, I might have missed something, or you might have said it. This trip, you were already in grad school in Houston, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So you were already in grad school in Houston, and now you do this trip with Sonny and them. Now we're at a year and a half after that.
Correct.
Okay.
So it was 2001 when I did that trip with them. It was like maybe April or May of 2001.
Okay.
And And I remember when I came back, I was exhilarated. And I was like, hey, there's all these people. They're just traveling. It's crazy.
Right.
And they're hitchhiking and they're going all these places. I can't even believe it. It's just, they're just going for months on end. And I was telling everybody, and I was so excited about it. And just like anything, you get excited about something and everybody else just goes, whatever, dude, this is not, we're Americans.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Well, it's not for me.
Yeah. Or even more was, and this is really it, is that, you know, I was on the railroad track. I was on the, you know, you get good grades in high school so you can go to a good college. And then you get good grades there and you do good there so you can go off to, you know, get a graduate degree somewhere. And then you do that and you go off and you get a good job and then there you go. You made it through life. And
yeah, you have a couple kids and that's it.
And then you kind of call it a day.
Right.
And I was on the railroad track. I was on the train, right? Doing all, you know, kind of checking the traditional, I don't know, boxes that you go on. Yeah. And I started to realize, and I was having lots of fun along the way, make no mistake about it, but I started to realize that there was all these other things I wanted to do. And I just kind of took stock of my own personal situation and said, let's see, at that time I was maybe 25 and I was unattached. I didn't have any kids, I didn't have a significant other, I didn't really have any real obligations. You're 25, you're still in this period of time where like nobody really expects anything of you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you hadn't made a bed yet to lay in,
or whatever.
Right.
And that's part of it.
Yeah.
It is part of it, is kind of what our expectations are, but also the truth is I realized, man, I'm still pretty young.
Yeah.
And you don't really get to go down this path too many times. And you know, you really just get one time through and that's it. And I just thought to myself, you know, if I don't take this opportunity now, then it could be gone. And it might be gone for a good reason. You know, maybe if you have kids or you meet the woman of your dreams could be around the corner the next day. You never know.
Yeah.
I knew that those things were there and you can't control those. And I just thought, I have the opportunity to do this. So I just started to work my way towards it. And it all started with that trip in '01. It took a couple of years, and again, I don't want to. We've already been talking for probably 30 minutes already.
Yeah.
And I could tell another 45-minute story about how I got there. But eventually, after another phenomenal trip to Argentina and into Brazil, where I went to my very first carnival, and I met the infamous Joanna, which is also another great story. But after another trip and really kind of dipping my toe in the waters, I realized, okay, this is what I'm going to do this. I'm going to organize my life so that I can go. And so, you know, in short, I, you know, over a year's time, I started to kind of plan it out. I started socking a little bit of money away. I eventually sold everything that I owned. Moved in with Sonny, the same guy from the story a minute ago, and you know, saved a little bit of money on rent for a few months, and then and he was you know, he owned a condo, so he was gracious enough to let me stay there with him, and I decided I was going to leave graduate school and take a year off and just go and travel for a year, and the decision was something I had already made a long time ago and understood, you know, the emotion and the reasons behind what it was I was doing. But the scariest part for me in the end was like saying it out loud and telling people. Because people go, well, okay, you're off, you're doing your PhD in cell biology and, you know, you're on this path, so why would you give it all up? You're throwing everything away to go, you know, go travel the world or go have some experience or whatever.
Right.
And boy, it was met with a lot of, this decision I made really was met with a lot of, you know, head scratching from several people. But it also was met with, you know, from the people who really knew me, especially some of my really close international friends in Houston. They were really supportive. And I really was afraid to kind of tell people, especially my folks and, you know, and you and some of the other people who had known me my whole life, because because I felt like people wouldn't understand what it was I was trying to do, but I knew enough inside of me that it was the right direction I wanted to go. I knew that the opportunity was showing itself, and that it was up to me to take action and to take it. And so in January of 2003, that's it. I left graduate school. Like I said, I sold everything that I owned. I packed my few belongings that I had left in a backpack, and off I went to Brazil for probably the biggest fork in the road of my life, and it worked out, more than well. I can't even describe what it meant for me to do that. And I remember one other quick thing I'll say about it is that there was or two things. One was that there was a woman that I worked with, and that was the admin on our floor who kind of took care of stuff for our lab, and we were good friends. And she was a single black mother who was raising a young son that was like probably maybe 8 or 9 or 10 at the time or something like that. And she had really reached out to me to kind of mentor him. And I, at that time, I don't know, I guess on paper you go, oh, here's somebody who went to college and he's going to do his PhD and he's doing all these things, but I never felt like any of those things were great accomplishments, or I never felt like any of those things really meant anything. It was just like, this is what I'm doing, Yeah. And I look around and there's all these other people doing it. And what happens is you get into this world where everybody you know went to college, everybody you know is doing a PhD or an MD or something like that, and then you think that everybody's doing that. And you don't really see, especially at that time, that you're actually kind of going through and accomplishing something. But I never really felt like I did anything, and she was one of the very first people who sort of pointed that out to me. And at that time, it was right around the same time, or not much after. If you remember Charles Barkley, he actually played for the Rockets at the very end of his career. And I remember I used to see him out in the bars in Houston and stuff. And I think maybe one of the times you saw him too when we were out. But anyway, there was a famous story from Barkley that happened in the late 90s where he got in a fight in a bar or something. And so he got interviewed about it later, and they said to him, hey, don't you feel like you should be setting an example for all these kids out there? Don't you feel like you should be doing that? And he had this famous quote where he said, I am not a role model. And even Barkley, somebody of that level of fame, and probably maybe he was 30 something at the time, I don't know how old he was, did not understand the things that he had done, and that as you reach some sort of celebrity status, or you're in that role, you don't get to choose if you're a role model or not. He didn't understand it at the time, but I remember saying, and look, I'm not trying to say I was Charles Barkley, just that like, here was a woman who was saying, hey, you're a role model, and I was thinking, I am not a role model.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything.
It's a theory of relativity.
What's so special about what I've done? I haven't done anything that anybody else can do or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember that
if you're from let's say a family of deadbeats, and Jim Bob down the block has a job, that's a role model for you.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? It's the relativity of it. Like, wait a minute, I'm raising my kid so that he can be like Jim Bob. He's got a job. None of you fucking fools got a job. You know what I mean?
It's true, and it's a good, and actually, it's a really good way to kind of start taking some steps in life, right? You could go, okay, I want to be Elon Musk, but you might want to try to be Jim Bob first and get the goddamn job. Okay, and so anyway, she opened my eyes to a few things, and so because of that, I saw her. She was a little bit of a mother figure to me in my time in graduate school, and so I had this great fear of telling her, "Hey, I'm leaving here and gonna go traveling." I which just scared the crap out of me to tell her, and she was one of the last people I told. I just could not bring myself to say out loud to her. And she was one of the last people I told in Houston or whatever. The hardest one was telling my folks. There's no question about that. But I remember when I told her, I was saying to her, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I learned that, I learned that on the trip before. This is what I was born to do. And all the stuff that I'm doing now is just here. And it's not going anywhere. And I started to figure that part out, that, this is always going to be here. But I only have this opportunity where I'm young and I'm unattached, and I can kind of go and travel freely, and you can kind of travel on the cheap and all those things. I kind of realized that I wanted to do it, and I told her that, I remember at the time I was saying that you were talking about happiness earlier, and I told her that, look, I know this is the right decision and the right path, and even if I get on that plane, a month from now at that time, and the plane goes down, I know I will go down happy. I know that I took the path and took the chance and took my life and pushed it in the direction I wanted it to go. What the hell is the rest of it for anyways?
Right.
And she started bawling. We were sitting in a little restaurant, and she was, I don't know, at the time she seemed older. She was probably 45 or something like that. And she really started bawling, and she was, and she said, I'm really proud of what it is you're doing, and that you have that, kind of level of understanding. And it really was it was really the first point of that process of kind of telling people where I felt like it was okay. And I knew there was always going to be haters. There always are going to be. But it kind of gave me, the courage I needed to call my mom and dad up and kind of, and tell them. And
that's kind of funny. I didn't get any pushback, right? I feel like I was just like, dude, that's sweet. Are you can you come back to school if you want to? I feel like that was all.
That's funny. I think, I'll tell you that we had not as long of a discussion about it, but we talked about it. I think that it's funny, we've never discussed this, but before I could tell Jeff about it, you told him. And
no shit.
And they're because I was gonna be at home and see him or something. I can't remember what the scenario was or whatever. Damn, you had told him beforehand, and from his reaction, you guys had clearly made fun of me about it, which kind of bugged me. And it's hard to remember that now, but I remember that.
To think back how that went.
So and I still remember it. He said, he's like, oh, I talked to Mike about this. We think this is some sort of wife hunt for you.
I don't remember that.
And I still remember that. And at that time too, I was at a different stage. I think he was in a pretty serious relationship at that time. Yeah. Or, it was still going at that time. Yeah. And I was not interested in a relationship at all. and I think that, not having, he was definitely somebody who did not approve of it. And I remember I wrote him this big long email after we met and talked, and he was just kind of saying this is dumb. Why are you doing this? He wasn't saying you're throwing your life away, but he did not think it was a good idea. Yeah. And I kind of felt like he was channeling what your thought was, but you would never be you've always had a philosophy of, maybe I don't like what you're doing, maybe I do, but do whatever the F you want.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't.
You've always had that mentality.
Yeah.
And I think both of us have a lot of that too, where it's as long as you're not out hurting other people or doing something that's affecting others in a negative way, do whatever it is you want to do. Anyway, I remember I was at Delgado's with him. I had dinner with him at Delgado. We had this 2-hour discussion.
I can't believe that. I can't believe this is the way that
we had an hours-long discussion. And I should after this is over, I'll show. I remember I wrote him a big long email saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing, and I hope you're going to support me." I don't even remember what I wrote, but I really felt like I was going in the right direction, and so. Anyway, I ultimately, obviously, I'm telling the story from the other side, so I did go, but all of it was this long fork in the road where I knew what I wanted to do, then I was like trying to organize my life to do it, and then, I had this big hurdle of telling people, and I remember that, particularly this woman that I was talking about earlier that I told was the first time that I was like, okay, there's some acceptance out there. Let me continue saying this. Because, now we have perspective. Now we're 40 and you go, oh, actually life sucks. So you might as well go do some cool shit. But at the time, you just think you have the world by the balls. Anyway, just to kind of put a little bit of bow on this part of the story is that a month later, whenever it was, I went back home and saw everybody, and then my parents drove me up to Chicago to get on a plane, and I got on a plane to Brazil, and I still remember, the whole time it's like all these things happening, you're talking to people and you're saying what you're going to do and you're excited about it or whatever, but then you go sit in that plane terminal and you're sitting there at the gate and you're just like, what the fuck am I doing? Okay, and so you really, you're like, there's no turning back now, or whatever. You really go through a thing there, and you start remembering all those things. I remember I kind of got on my journal, I started writing, and I sort of said that I was like, well, there's no turning back now, and I was probably the most afraid I've ever been in my life, but at that time, but the most excited I'd ever been at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And I had some level of awareness of it, and I was just bawling my eyes out sitting there at the terminal. People probably thought, man, what's wrong with this dude, man? Yeah. And I got I got on the plane, and I don't know, some could say the rest was history.
Yeah.
In many ways, but I remember very specifically about a week and a half or 2 weeks later, I met this Australian guy when I first got there, and I traveled with him to a couple different towns. We went to this place called Trindade, and we went to this beach called Praia de Sonho, and I remember we had to do this little trek to this beach. We hiked over this mountain and all this stuff, and I had this amazing day where I just went with this dude because he was going to this town. We found a place to stay. We ended up trekking over this mountain and going to this amazing beach, and we spent the day there, and then we got a little water taxi back to the main kind of area, and we went out to this little beach bar. And at the time, I had not had many nights where I would just dance in the sand, but they were playing music. There was all these Brazilians there, and there was no other foreigners there besides me and him, and we were just dancing in the sand and playing music, and I was talking to locals and stuff, and I was just overwhelmed with the experience of it all. And I remember at some point, I was like, it was a beach bar, and you could walk 50 yards down, 100 yards down, and go kind of sit at the water. And at some point I did. I kind of walked away, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, Brazil. And I went down and kind of sat by the ocean, and at that moment I was like, I feel pure contentment. I feel like every decision I've ever made to get to this point, to be sitting right now on this beach in this random ass little place in Brazil, was the right one. And so many times along the way you're second guessing yourself, or you're not sure, or you're trying to tell people and you don't know. But that moment on that beach in Praia de Sonho, I was and felt pure contentment. I was so happy with every piece of my life and everything I had done to be right there. And I could have just died at that moment of just pure happiness.
Yeah.
And it overwhelmed me. It was just overwhelming emotion of that moment. And it was, I can't say there was anything special about just sitting on the sand on the beach or whatever. But everything that I had done to get there and be sitting there, and I finally felt free. I finally felt and understood, that I don't know if I had a goal for that feeling. It wasn't. I definitely did not. But I understood the true joy of personal happiness. And once you have that, once you know what that feels like, you start pushing and wanting to push your whole life to have that, and just stay in that zone or whatever. And you find yourself. I reflect back to that moment a lot because I felt like that was the completion of me taking that fork in the road. That was the completion of me kind of taking that opportunity, and that was the completion of me finding pure happiness and really sort of understanding the pursuit of happiness. Even though I wasn't really trying to do that, I realized that how important of a piece of life that is. And so
this is interesting because I didn't when we started this I didn't think that I was going to tell this story or counter it by any way. But this I want to tell my quick flip side of the story. I can do it in just a few sentences. So the opposite of what he's saying right now. So when do you remember? I don't know if you remember this. I think we were seniors. We had to be seniors in high school, and I remember we were in a gym. I don't remember. We were in a gym, and you were the first person I told that I wasn't going to college. I was going to go to Orlando. I was going to try to work for Disney, and I'd figure out how to become an entertainer that way. And you were just like, yeah, sweet, dude, go ahead. I mean, you're 100% like, yeah, I mean, whatever, if that's what you think, And I think you had already been accepted into Notre Dame, and I was just like, college isn't for me, I'm going to do it. You were the first person I vocalized to it, and your response was fine, so I started telling a few other people. And unfortunately, and so some of them I had respect for, and I listened to them instead of myself. And my voice teacher and just a couple other adults in my life, and they were like, that's dumb, go to college first and then you can go to Orlando whenever you want, or do whatever. But the problem with that is when you have those, when I was 17/18 years old, that's when I had the skill set for chasing down what I wanted to do. That's also when I had the confidence to do it. That's also,
that is it. Yes.
Yeah. And so after 5 years of college, it took me 5 to, and then and not maybe having some of the successes that you had planned on doing or whatever, your confidence is different or shook, or your skill, you're not as enthusiastic about chasing down what you wanted to chase down. And so the point is, I never made it to Orlando. Not that I would have, because at 23, it's not the same as going when I was 18. And at that time, for those of you who don't know the time frame, I didn't know it. There wasn't a crystal ball in front of me. But for some reason, I was called to Orlando. And I'm not saying that I would have made it or whatever. But within the next 3 years, every young little pop star was coming out of Orlando. And it, to this day, kills me that I didn't listen to my instinct. I'm not saying I would have made it. I'm not saying I would have been running with any of those groups. But I cost myself the opportunity by not listening to my own instincts or to my own calling, whatever you want to, however you want to word it. But that's interesting because I never realized that's just an interesting opposite, because if I had done what I really felt I should have did. I could be sitting here in the exact same scenario, telling these exact same stories, and saying, well, at least I gave it a shot, or it didn't, and it didn't pan out. But nothing. This time has now passed, and I don't have an Orlando story for you where I went down there and auditioned for this, or I didn't. You know what I mean? And it's like, I look at that. I went through college. I had a good time in college. The last year or two. The first couple of years, all I did was work. But the last year or two, I had a good time, and then I figured out a way to get out here to New York, etc. But there is you can't sit around and mope and worry about your past and regrets, but I do regret that. I don't cry about it every day, but I do hate that I did not trust that inner calling that you said you felt, because I was dead set on going to Orlando, and I told the wrong people too soon. I think I needed to tell some other people first and build more steam so that it was already a train in motion.
I think what happens is that you're really influenced. You're really influenced by people's reactions and things at that time, which is like I was saying. I was really afraid to kind of tell people and stuff. But you kind of touched on an important point. at the end there. It's like, look, just because whatever you choose, whatever you go and do instead of whatever you did, also becomes a piece of who you are and a piece of you know, of your life or your life story, or a foundation and the brick of, you know, who you became. And like I said, none of those things are necessarily bad or good or whatever along the way. And I don't know, I would say that, you know, maybe you would have never been here, and all these great things that have come from this part of the experience too. So there's no way to know.
There's no way to know.
It'd be really awesome if we could go back and live life, and then go back and go, what if I just changed this one thing, and then live it again? And what if I just changed this? But it doesn't work like that.
It's true, but I'll tell you what. When I really think about it, and that all of that is true, but here was the major thing that I knew that I was not. Every morning I woke up, I felt out of place. I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want to go to work. I hated everything. Every day I woke up, I'm like, this sucks. This is college. It's not supposed to feel that way. That's how I felt, though, especially for the first few years. And I'm like, and it was all because I was listening to somebody else instead of my own heart, to other people instead of my own calling. So I don't know. I mean, it's two similar stories. One took action, one didn't. What's right, what's wrong, whatever. I took the safe road that I was told to take, and I do. I still regret it, but I don't. But I feel like if you're at that fork, and the difference is if you choose the one that isn't the one that you're, you know, that you actually thought you might want to do, and you're miserable doing the other thing, maybe you just jump. It's not, you know, if it's within a time period, if it's within a time frame, you might still be able to alter, be like, you know what, fuck this. I could have got halfway through the semester and said, this is bullshit. I'm not fucking out. I'm not going to Orlando. I don't care what these fucking people think. That's maybe what I should have did.
I mean, that's what it's about. Is that you do have this thing, like I said, you start to learn the value of personal happiness, and I understood it then, and I've tried to carry that throughout my life and my life decisions through the other forks in the road that I've had, and there's been plenty of others, or a few other really big ones, I should say. And I think you can learn the same lesson either way, though. Maybe that's the overall point, right? Is you can still learn the importance of, you know, of following that thing that you wanted to do in your gut. You can still learn the importance. Certainly, you more than understand, as we talked about today, that opportunities show themselves, and whether you take action or don't, you can still learn from that thing, and then apply it to the next situation. And go, wait a minute, I didn't take action,
right?
And you know, I wish I would have done it, so now I'm going to. The most beautiful part of it all is that, like, circling back to the very beginning of this conversation, is that it's never too late to keep learning. It's never too late to seize those opportunities that come. You know, they still come at 45, they come at 50, they come at 60, they still come. And so
72 is the cap.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. That's it. And there's no more 40s. Except for if you're Don Rickles.
That's right.
So, you know, I think one of the keys to life is, you know, kind of learning from your past successes and your past mistakes, which is kind of a cliche, but I think you do, right? There's that saying, right? There's no failures, there's only learning, or something to that effect. Yeah. And so
I either win or I learn.
That's good. Yeah, that's it. Or that's one of the versions of it. Yeah. So I think that, like, you still got X number of decision points that are going to come after this from that moment, and you already know this. I know, but you know, just for people listening out there, I'm sure there's somebody who is, you know, 25 who's thinking, man, I really want to do whatever, and maybe I should go and do it. And I'm sure there's people who are 55 who are thinking exactly the same thing. And that is exactly where we started, is you don't know shit.
That's right.
And so, but the one thing you can kind of know is that, you know, or hopefully see or understand, is when opportunity shows itself, or maybe you're the one who kind of creates opportunity to show itself, that you can take advantage of that and follow your path, and hopefully live the life that you want to live too. That's the whole point of it all. And in my opinion.
I think that's an excellent point to cut this. I think that we can. I think we'll wrap this up now. It was a great conversation. Of course, we always have great conversations, but this one was shared with you, so I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did having it. And both of us are very open people. If you're somebody out there that doesn't really know us real well, or you would like to, there's ways to contact us, or to just send us an email. We have websites. I mean, there's stuff that we're not unavailable. We can't be. I just want people to know that. Like, we're busy. We have shit going on, so we can't coach you through everything in your whole life by any means. Not trying to be life coaches. But my point is this: if you ever had a question or something like that, both of us are open to answer it, or say so, or give you a little encouragement if you had, one of these forks in the road and say, man, I really want to do this, but blah, blah, blah. And you just need somebody to tell you it's okay. Those kinds of, we're happy to have those kinds of conversations. So, we're going to wrap this up. Please check out the website, www. I don't know why I say that, worldwideweb. the1218show.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as we did putting it on. In the meantime, and until the next one, have a great time. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Peace.
Peace.